Well, it's Prescoquinos, and this week is newspapers for our AC171 Mass Communication Survey. So, newspapers. Um, One of the first newspapers was published by the Roman Senate, and it basically was a tablet, carved tablet that was put out, acta diurna, the actions of the day, whatever the Senate decisions were, for the public to see. Various corantos and diurnals. These were daily kind of papers that had news about the day, political actions, parliamentary decisions, things like that. And then the colonies. So the newspaper was a big part of colonial life. The early publishers like Peter Zenger criticized the royal government. In fact, Zenger was jailed for his criticism that he published, and he was actually defended by Andrew Hamilton and subsequently freed. So the First Amendment, the Bill of Rights, states that Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of speech and freedom of the press. Became more popular, you had the penny press. And this was a very inexpensive kind of way for the publishers to disseminate information. And for a penny, you could buy the newspaper and get the news of the day, and also other things like advertisements. One of the interesting things in the industry is this idea of correspondence, and you would have correspondents who were on a kind of beat, and the most popular one is the idea of a Washington correspondent. So someone who would be, in Washington and in tune with the workings of government in Washington, the Congress, and the president, and they would know the beat and know the kind of ground at their territory. So the other thing is the idea of the people's medium. So Freedom's Journal was an African American newspaper, and Frederick Douglass published a newspaper called the North Star. And these were influential kind of publications that communicated to the African American community. African Americans to move out of the South and to move north after the Civil War. And there's also Native American press. The Cherokee Phoenix is pictured here. So the idea of a kind of dedicated press to various ethnic groups. And then we have the wire services. So wire services really kind of freed newspapers from having to gather their own news. It gave them the idea that they could, take the news from these wire services and have much more breadth of information. So these services are still around today, and they are, available in most newsrooms. Yellow journalism. So this is actually something that was brought about by Joseph Pulitzer, and he is the originator, actually, of the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. But when the paper wasn't selling too well, some of the ideas were to kind of sensationalize the news. And you see some of these covers here where you have these giant headlines and huge illustrations and cartoons, color, war, sex, drugs, rock and roll. Basically, the idea of really kind of eye-catching news that would sell papers, Then we have the newspaper chains, and this is the idea again of conglomeration, where various publishers would be buying up small newspapers and publishing through those chains. So newspaper readership, we know, is down. People are getting their news from so many other places, and and newspapers have to adjust to this. And I think a lot of things are the ideas of bringing the paper online, bringing the paper into an electronic environment where it's more available and also more adaptable to new media and newer audiences. Pass along readership. This is the idea that you found the paper on the chair and you picked it up. So one person buys it and 3-4 people read it. Or you might walk into a doctor's office and there's the paper sitting there. So one paper can have lots of readership. There are lots of zoned editions, so you might have like the paper that is just for your local community, and the idea of these papers there are that again, advertisers can use them to really target local communities. So I might be a local advertiser and I place an ad in the local paper, kind of like a penny saver, or something where I know my readers know who I am and would come to my establishment, so my ad would get a lot of return. Obviously, newspapers need to make money, and with all the competition, one of the things that might be happening is more and more advertising in the paper, whether it be straight advertising or even advertorial, which seems like an editorial article, but it's actually kind of funded by an advertiser. So it might be an editorial on the popularity of pizza or something, and it's actually brought to you by a flour company or something like that. So there's some kind of hidden, agenda in there to actually sell more flour, even though it looks like an article, it's actually an advertisement. Okay, again, this looks at the idea of local readership and really being able to target your and then feature services. So feature services is almost like a kind of clearinghouse, syndication, where if I have a paper, I can go to these syndicates and say, I want to include certain columnists, certain cartoons. So it's kind of like I can pick and choose various ingredients to put into my paper to make it more formidable, more kind of adaptable to my audience. Okay, again, with convergence and conglomeration, lots of people are not reading newspapers, so they're getting their news from other places. There's a lot less newspapers being published. There's a loss of competition, which could be dangerous in the idea of kind of like a monopoly in the newspaper. Lots of commercialization, sponsored content, the idea of the mission of the paper, right? So, can they still fulfill their mission of kind of being the watchdog, where they could report on what's going on in the local government, the local schools, the major government. The paper was always the kind of freedom of the press, and they could protest something or examine something or output something to the people that might be hidden without them. Okay, and these different kind of models of newspaper, how you get your news. You might get it, from the newspaper, but you guys are probably getting. You check your phone. You might get your news from social media. You might get a lot of your news from Facebook or YouTube instead of looking at an actual online newspaper. You'll have the news kind of disseminated through that. So there's a kind of marriage between the newspaper and the web. Again, a lot of papers that have their own websites, they're looking to make money still, so they may do things like have a paywall where you have to subscribe to the newspaper. They may give you a short story. They'll give you half the story, and then to read further, you have to pay. one of the things that's interesting about this too is that they can gather information about you. So when you are online looking at the paper, they'll know, how long you looked at it, what you clicked on, what you actually, were interested in. So this is part of the analytics data that then can be used later on to maybe send you advertisements or specialized stories. Okay, and again, just reiterating the idea that the new media, the new generation is looking for their news in a more kind of compact, easy to use, easy to access, also easy to customize, right? You can, look at a news and, put in a couple of your tastes, for instance, so that this way the newspaper, the news that they're sending you is really tailored to your interests. You might want to see more about politics or more about economics or more about entertainment, and you're able to kind of tailor that much more with news. Okay, and then this chart shows the idea that, how people would pay for online news subscriptions. I think a lot of us feel that, things on the web should be free. So, what's going to make you actually plop down your credit card and decide that you want to really fund these online news sources? Okay, and then the final concept here is the idea of where stories might appear. Obviously, the front cover is an important part of the paper. It's something that you can glance at right away. And then you have this idea of the first page, the way the paper is folded. So the important stuff in a paper like the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal that's folded in half, the important stuff would be on the left side, on the top. Because, in English we read from left to right, top to bottom. So that's where the key kind of real estate is on the paper. And some papers are even selling out to the point where they might even have advertising right on the front cover. Okay, and this is just another chart that kind of gives you an idea of where that real estate is important in the paper. Okay, so enjoy the reading for this week, and I've posted a quiz for you guys. I'm also going to post something in the discussion later.